Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Bakra, and I am back with making another YouTube video. It's been years since I've made one of these, 8 years to be exact, into me making another YouTube video. But, after like a long hiatus like that, I've done some like thinking, and you know what? I thought to myself, like, I really want to go back into making YouTube videos. I really want to go back into making content that I know that I'm good at, and that I have high knowledge at. I want to go back to making NFL content. I'm a big NFL fan, so I want to make content on that. And also just to expand my platform and talk about other things, other topics like talk about like everything in the world, talk about my favorite movies, TV shows, my favorite food, all of that, but I'll come up with more ideas as I get back into making YouTube videos and creating content. But mostly I'll be focusing on NFL content. So I'm excited, So without further ado, let's get back into it. So right now the NFL free agency has been going on, and it's been a little while. But I do want to recap some of the stuff that's been going on. I am a Las Vegas Raiders fan. Unfortunately, it's been a rough, like I don't even know how many years, like 23 years it's been being a Raiders fan. But the Raiders, they're having an interesting offseason thus far. They hired the best coach on the market, Clint Kubiak, an offensive mind. They so far have had a productive offseason, trading for Taron Johnson, signing Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, re-signing Eric Stokes and Malcolm Coons, signing Kwity Paye. But of course, the big story going on with the Raiders is Max Crosby. And last Friday they traded Max Crosby to the Baltimore Ravens for two first-round picks. And of course, last night the Ravens backed out of that trade after Max Crosby failed his physical. So now Max Crosby's on the Raiders right now, and the Ravens get their two first-round picks back. Also, I think the thing with this is it affects the cap space for both teams. Like the Raiders, they're going to take on Max Crosby's contract again, and the Ravens freed up money. Though the Ravens just made a move this morning, so we'll get into it. But so far, I've been liking what the Raiders have been doing. Now, when it comes to Max Crosby, I've seen a report that's saying that there is a scenario where the Raiders could keep Max Crosby, keep the free agent signings that they've agreed to, which I think they should do anyway, because that's just good business. Like if you back out of those deals, that's just bad business, and it creates a bad reputation for your franchise. So I think that you can keep all that, and still have enough cap space to sign your rookies. If that were to happen, I mean, I think that's a pretty good offseason, if you ask me, for the Raiders. And you're going to draft, you had the number one pick. You're going to draft Fernando Mendoza, the highly rated prospect, coming off winning the Heisman and the national championship with the University of Indiana. If the Raiders, if they could nail, like, they're going to take Mendoza, and if they could nail, like, their second round pick, the Raiders, they'll be starting to finally put some things together. I know we say this a lot, but really, as a Raiders fan, you haven't really seen an offseason like this where we have a competitive team, we finally have a good coach, we have that franchise quarterback we can build around. We got some building blocks to build off, such as Ashton Genty, who was your first round pick last year, Brock Bowers, who was the first round pick the year before that, and you still have two offensive linemen, Colton Miller, who's a good offensive tackle when he's healthy, and Jackson Powers Johnson, who's a young offensive lineman who was starting to figure it out last season before he got hurt. And of course, last year, the 2025 was a disastrous season for the Raiders, really depressing as a Raiders fan. But, I think the Raiders are finally to start turning that corner. And, And I don't think any teams are going to trade for Max Crosby right now, especially after he failed the physical. I think his medical concerns are a little worse than probably all of us thought, including the Baltimore Ravens. And I think the Baltimore Ravens, they played this smartly. It's unfortunate. He failed his physical. You really wanted to, have Max Crosby on your roster. Um, but that wasn't the case. So, but hey, you got your cap space back, you got your first round picks back, and they just signed Trey Hendrickson, which, the deal itself, I mean, paying a 31-year-old pass rusher, and Trey Hendrickson is a good pass rusher, but paying him, almost 30 mil a year at the age of 31, that's definitely a decision. So, but I mean, it's a needed decision. The Ravens do need some pass rushers, as they hired a defensive minded coach and Jesse Minter, and they got some players on that defense that's already good. So, to get someone like Trey Hendrickson will definitely help a lot. And getting those first round picks will help. There are some reports saying that, the Ravens backed out the trade, seeing their players leaving free agency, seeing that, because their cap space was absolutely horrible with Max Crosby on the roster because they're taking on his contract. And right now, their offensive line is atrocious, if you ask me, just looking at their depth chart. Um, so the Ravens, they really needed to do this, and I think it was a smart idea. So, and probably it does hold back, the process a little bit for the Raiders, but I think that this was a smart play by both teams, and I think the Raiders will probably keep Max Crosby. I mean, they still could trade him up to the trade deadline. And as a Raiders fan, it's gonna be annoying hearing, reports and rumors, about other teams being interested in Max Crosby, especially as he heals from his surgery on his torn meniscus that he had in January. Because he'll be ready. Reports are coming out that he'll be ready around July, August, or probably be ready around training camp. It'll be also interesting to see how the Raiders use him as they have a new defensive coordinator. They're going to use a new formation, a new scheme. So, we'll see how it goes, but absolutely wild news. And, to recap some of the free agency moves made by other teams, let's start with the Carolina Panthers, who have really made two major moves. One in signing Jalen Phillips to, I think it was a 4 year, $120 million contract, which pays about 30 mil a year. And Jalen Phillips, who is a productive NFL player, that's a little bit of an overpay if you ask me. Um, it's a need that the Panthers need, but if you're Jalen Phillips, they're paying you that much. They're expecting you to at least become a perennial Pro Bowl player. So, it's a good signing by the Panthers. We'll see how it goes. They also signed Devin Lloyd to a 3 year, $45 million deal, which pays about 15 mil a year, which is also a really good signing. So even though Carolina literally made two moves in free agency, those are two really good moves. In staying in that division, the Atlanta Falcons, so the Miami Dolphins released Tua Tagovailoa, which freed up about 99 million in dead cap, and the Atlanta Falcons signed him, to have a quarterback competition with Michael Penix, both left-handed quarterbacks who have had injury history, but Tua is more proven in the NFL than Michael Penix Jr. I think this is a good spot for Tua. I think that, you have Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts back. The offensive line should get healthy. They have a solid defense. I think it's a good spot for Tua. Still need another receiver, like a wide receiver too, if you will. But I like the spot for Tua. We'll see if he can, rescue his career, after the Miami Dolphins released him. And then the New Orleans Saints, they're making some low key good moves, signing Travis Etienne, left guard David Edwards. They're making some moves here and there where, Tyler Shuck showed some flashes last year. Kellen Moore's looking to be a good offensive coach. The big thing with the Saints is they released Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, two aging players who really have had bad contracts, going off their production on the field. So you're able to get rid of that, free up some more cap space to make these moves. So I like what the Saints are doing. I like the direction that they're going. In Tampa Bay, they haven't really done anything, and towards the end of last season, they really regressed a lot. So the NFC South will be interesting. Shifting on to the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles really haven't done much in free agency. They did sign Tyreek Woolen to a 1 year deal, which I like, but that's really been about it. Of course, it's still early in free agency. Like there's still a lot of players to be signed. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think at 4 p.m. Eastern, or actually right now, that's when players, they can agree to sign the contract. They can officially sign the contract. I should say, and more teams will be releasing players. Like the 49ers will release Brandon Ayuk. The Arizona Cardinals will release Kyler Murray, which the Minnesota Vikings are really interested in signing him. I mean, if that happens, I should make a separate video on that because I think that's a big move. Um, shifting on to the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles, they haven't done anything, but they have the best general manager in the NFL and Howie Roseman. Bringing in a new offensive coordinator, an experienced one, bringing a new offensive line coach. We'll see how it goes with the Eagles, and of course you have the whole AJ Brown thing. Will they trade him? Will they keep him? The Eagles, they're still a proven team. They're a proven winning team, but at the end of the day, it's still the National Football League, and every year is different. The NFL, it's built to be a 1 year league. Unless if you have like an elite quarterback, elite coach, or an elite offensive line or defense, it's really built to be a 1 year league. So when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, they just traded for Rashawn Gary. They signed Thompson from the Cardinals, making some low key moves. I like what the Cowboys are doing. Jerry Jones is playing it by the ear. Not listening to the outside noise about him making splash after splash in free agency. Like in the National Football League, you need scheme, you need players that fit that scheme, you need a system in place. You need the players to buy in. It's not all about signing like big free agents. It would be nice, but you still gotta gel. You still gotta build that continuity. You still gotta build that chemistry. Still gotta have a system in place. Really, if you ask me, I think coaching and having a system and a scheme means more than anything. Just look at the Seattle Seahawks. They don't really have like great dominant players on their team, but they had a very good system. They had players that bought in. They had players that know each other. And their scheme was just absolutely crazy, both offensively and defensively. And as a result, they won the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold at quarterback. So that's really what you need. In the NFL. Yes, it would be nice to have the best players available, but that doesn't always work out at the end. So I like what the Cowboys are doing. The New York Giants have been making some good signings, some under the radar type signings. With John Harbaugh there, they're going to be a gritty team. They're going to be interesting to look forward to, though you have Matt Nagy as offensive coordinator, and I'm not a big fan of Matt Nagy. In Washington, they have the most cap space remaining, but they haven't really made that many signings. They signed two rotational pass rushers. Soon reports are coming out that as soon as Brandon Ayuk gets released, he'll probably sign with the Commanders to be paired with Jaden Daniels. But if you look at the Commanders roster, dude, it just isn't good besides Jaden Daniels, who, had a stellar rookie season, but in his second season has been injury riddled. So we'll see how he turns out. But, you look at the Commanders roster and you're just like, this isn't good enough. And considering, the team with the most cap space, you should be able to do more. But, like I said, it's still a little bit early, so we'll see how, it all goes. I'm thinking about like probably like after the draft, making like a power rankings. Yeah, I think I probably would do that, but I'll probably make it after the draft, obviously. So, and then shifting to the NFC West, you have the San Francisco 49ers, who signed Mike Evans to a 3 year, $60 million deal, which pays about $20 million a year. I really like the signing by the 49ers, Mike Evans. He's going to be a good fit into this Kyle Shanahan offense. There are some reports about them, as I mentioned, releasing Brandon Ayuk, who really hasn't played football. And like when this NFL season comes up, hasn't played football in 2 years. And they're looking to trade Trent Williams if he doesn't restructure his deal. So we'll see what the 49ers do. And obviously they hired Raheem Morris as defensive coordinator. You look at the LA Rams, they traded for Trent McDuffie, even gave him a huge deal. But I like it. It fills a need that they needed, which was cornerback. They also signed the other Chiefs cornerback in Jalen Watson. So the Rams, they're doing whatever they can to fill in their need. The Rams look good right now. They're the second best team in football last year. Matthew Stafford is getting up there in age, but the Rams are still a really good football team. The Seattle Seahawks are losing players. They lost Kenneth Walker, lost Tyreek Woolen. They did re-sign some players like Shaheed, Josh Jobe. So we'll see how the Seattle Seahawks do this upcoming season, the reigning defending Super Bowl champions. And you have the Arizona Cardinals, who is probably having the worst offseason of any team. They signed Gardner Minshew, they signed Algier, but I'm just not buying into what the Cardinals are selling right now. And now they're going to start they're thinking about starting Jacoby Brissett this upcoming season. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, you can't get rid of him. A journeyman quarterback, who's starting on his 100th team. I don't know what Arizona's doing. They're probably going to tank. They want that number one pick next year. Sorry, Cardinals fans, but it's just hard to buy into what the Cardinals are selling to their fan base this upcoming season. And then you look at probably the best division in football, the NFC North, where all four teams are competitive. The Chicago Bears are getting a little bit worse, in my opinion, losing some productive players, that they needed. That was good for them last year. And then you look at the Green Bay Packers, who brought in Zaire Franklin, who's a proven starter. They brought in Jonathan Gannon, a new defensive coordinator, after Jeff Hafley took the Dolphins head coaching job. But you already know the Packers. They're usually good every year. They're a well-run organization. They're a winning organization. They just win. Like they have. I don't know the last time they've had a 4-win season. So and then you look at the Minnesota Vikings, who signed James Pierre, who is a really good NFL cornerback. If you look at the advanced stats, he's pretty much up top when it comes to cornerbacks. So, and then, as there's reports coming out that they may sign Kyler Murray, when the Arizona Cardinals released him, which would be huge. And I probably would make a video on that. And then the Detroit Lions, who really their biggest offseason acquisition was replacing David Montgomery with Isaiah Pacheco, who's coming off an injury-riddled season. The Lions, they still have so many roster flaws, and I don't know if they're going to be able to improve that, this upcoming offseason. So at least they haven't shown signs of doing that. So, and then you look at the AFC, of course, the AFC West, I talked about the Raiders, the Kansas City Chiefs, they signed Kenneth Walker, which was a pretty good signing. I mean, the Chiefs needed a running back. Excuse me. They needed a running back bad because they couldn't run the ball last season. We'll see about Mahomes, who tore his ACL in December. So we'll see when he'll be back. I know it's 2026 where, like if you have a torn ACL, that can easily be fixed. But that's not usually always the case. Like it always takes like a while for those to recover, for those injuries to recover. So we'll see. And they're bringing back Travis Kelce, who, I mean, he's nearing the end of his career. And then you look at the other two teams, like the Broncos and the Chargers, really haven't done anything in free agency. It's a little strange. I mean, they probably don't have the cap. I mean, the Chargers do have the cap space to do it, but they're just not doing anything. So that's really interesting. And then, of course, you look at the AFC North. You look at the Ravens, who just signed Trey Hendrickson. I mean, I probably would not have given a 31-year-old pass rusher that kind of money, but the Ravens really have no choice, especially since, Max Crosby failed his physical. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, after hiring Mike McCarthy, they made a trade for Michael Pittman Jr. I like that pickup, but the Steelers, they still need more, and they especially still need a quarterback if they're going to contend this upcoming season. I mean, who's your quarterback going to be? A 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers, a young quarterback who's unproven, or we don't really know. And if you're running back with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, good luck. I mean, the guy's 43 years old on his way to retirement. Either way, so we'll see how that goes. And you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, who's made some under the radar signings, but I like what the Bengals are doing. Yes, they lost Trey Hendrickson, but for being honest, I'm with Mike Brown and the Bengals management on that. I think the contract that Trey Hendrickson was asking was a little too much, and I would not have gave him that contract because that would take up some more of your cap space, and he really can't sign any meaningful players. So I like what the Bengals are doing. Mike Brown, kind of the same what Jerry Jones is doing, playing it by the ear, signing control what he can control, and not just make a big splash, such as big splash that has a high risk of not working out. And then look at the Cleveland Browns. Pretty much their whole offseason has been addressing the offensive line, which as they should, but they've really got like one offensive lineman I liked, which is Elton Jenkins from the Packers. Everything else has been, not that good. But to be honest, I'm not expecting the Browns to be a very good team. This upcoming season, they're just not a well-run organization. If you ask me, they don't have a quarterback that anybody believes in. We'll see about Shador Sanders. He really struggled his rookie year. Dylan Gabriel is very limited and kind of small in NFL standards. And you have Deshaun Watson, who's just not the same player, who's really distracted from the off the field stuff, and who has like probably the biggest contract in the NFL that the Browns can't get out of probably until after the 2026 season. But I mean, what a disaster that contract has turned into for the Browns. I mean, when they made that deal, they thought they were getting a stud. It's been the complete opposite. I mean, Deshaun Watson has been a totally different player, for different reasons since Houston Texans days, but oh well. And then the AFC South, Jacksonville hasn't really done anything, which is surprising for a team that won 13 games. The Colts just gave Daniel Jones a 2-year deal. I mean, I don't know what the Colts are doing there. I mean, Daniel Jones, he was playing really well until he tore his Achilles. But that's the thing, he tore his Achilles, so he may not even play this season. So I don't know what the Colts are doing there. I feel like they should go in a different direction at quarterback. In this upcoming season, where in my opinion the GM and the head coach are on the hot seat, even though they're both good. They're on the hot seat because the NFL, it's an instant results business, and they haven't been producing results. They haven't been to the playoffs in, I think, like since 2020. So that's just not good enough in the NFL. And you look at the Houston Texans, they're doing a pretty good job upgrading their offensive line as they should for CJ Stroud. I'm really liking what the Tennessee Titans are doing so far. I think the biggest winners, or at least one of them, should be the Tennessee Titans. They've been making some moves, bringing in Robert Saleh as head coach, Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator. They're really helping out their number one pick from a year ago in Cameron Ward at quarterback. But I like what the Titans are doing. I think the Titans could be a sneaky team this upcoming season, using their cap space very wisely. Then you look at the AFC East. You have the team that made the Super Bowl this past season, the New England Patriots, doing a lot of roster transactions. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, this is a team that just came off a Super Bowl appearance. So they're still going to be a very good team upcoming. You look at the Buffalo Bills. As I'm recording this video, they restructured Josh Allen's contract, which is a weapon, in my opinion, for the Bills. And they just signed Bradley Chubb, which I like that signing, but the Buffalo Bills, they still have a lot of holes on defense. They did trade for DJ Moore. I like that trade. They filled that upgrade at wide receiver. But the Bills, as long as Josh Allen is your quarterback, your championship window will always be open. As long as he's in his prime. But this Buffalo Bills defense, I'm just not so sure about it. And now you're bringing in a new head coach in Joe Brady. So we'll see how it goes. And then the New York Jets, they've been having a very productive off season. And they even brought back Geno Smith, who was god awful for the Las Vegas Raiders, and now he's getting traded back. He's getting traded back to where it all started, with the New York Jets. I mean, the dude's gonna be 36 years old. The Jets are doing a good job upgrading that defense into what Aaron Glenn wants, but that offense is very questionable. This kind of reminds me of the Robert Saleh Jets teams, with Aaron Glenn. They're probably going to have a productive defense, but their offense going to struggle when you need them need them to not struggle, unless they add another receiver. I just don't see this working out. And Geno going back to the Jets, it's a good story, for his NFL career. And I still believe in Geno. I mean, even though he was bad on the Raiders, we all know he's a hell of a lot better than what he showed. But I just don't think it's going to work with the Jets. I just don't. And their offensive coordinator is Frank Reich. So we'll see how it goes. In Miami, they've made one offseason move, was getting rid of Tua and bringing in Malik Willis. I like that. Going with Bobby Slowick's offense is very interesting to me, but the Dolphins still have a lot of roster flaws. So that was a lot. But, it's day 3 of free agency. Still a lot of moves to be made. Still a lot of decisions to be made. As I'm recording this video right now, there's probably some more moves that are happening, some more players getting released or getting traded. So, yeah, I mean, this was fun. I mean, I love, this is what I want to do. I want to come back to YouTube, start making videos, start making, talking ball with you guys, talking about whatever. So I'm looking to make this a consistent thing moving forward. Um, you know, Covering the NFL, covering other things as well. So, yeah. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.